Alright guys, so what I've done is just cleared everything out. I kept the UI so we still have the header and the container and all that. So now we're going to move on to events. So I'm going to go down into the container and I'm going to put a heading, and we're going to first discuss mouse events. Alright, so let's create a button. Okay, we'll say button, we'll give it an ID of btn1, and that's it for now. We'll say button 1. Alright, and let's create another one as well. Create button 2. Like that. Alright, so let's go down to our script tags, and I want to add a click event on button 1. So what we can do is we're going to use our selector, which we learned about in the last part, and we know that it has an ID of button 1, so we can use $, btn1, and then we're going to say dot click, and then inside this click we need to put in a self-calling function. Okay, now in here is what we want to happen when the button's clicked. So let's do alert, and we'll just say button clicked. So let's save that and reload. If I click it, we get button clicked. Now, before we move on, there is one thing I want to address, and that is that sometimes people, they like to put their JavaScript in the head. Okay, I prefer it down here in the body at the end, but if I were to move this up here like that, and we reload, and I click button 1, nothing happens. The reason for that is it's trying to grab button 1 before it actually loads on the page. Alright, so what we can do to prevent this from not working is use document.ready, which you've probably seen before. So what that is we're going to take our jQuery and we're going to say the whole document dot ready, meaning so when it's ready, then we're going to run this function. Okay, and then what we want to do is just take any of our jQuery and put it inside that. Okay, so what it's saying is don't run any of this code until the document's ready, till it's loaded. So now if we go and reload, and now I click button 1, it works. Alright, and even if you're going to put your JavaScript and jQuery down at the bottom, it's still a good idea to have this. So I'm going to move it back, but I'm going to keep that document ready. Okay, I probably should have mentioned that in the last part, but better late than never. Okay, so anyways, button.click, we run a function. Now, behind the scenes, this actually runs what's called the on method. All right, and I'm just going to give you an example of that. So if we say btn1.on, and then that's going to take two parameters. It's going to take the event we want, which is click, and then it'll take that function. Okay, so if I go ahead and grab that, and then let's comment this out, and we reload, click it, and it works in the same way. Okay, so you can use this dot on if you want, or you can use the shorthand and just use the actual event. Alright, some people say that doing it this way does save a couple milliseconds, but it's not really a big deal. Now, a lot of times you'll want to have an event that when fired, it does something to another element on the page somewhere. So what I'm going to do is under the button here, let's put a paragraph, and I'll just give it a class of para1. Alright, and I'm just going to grab some text here. This is actually from the jQuery site. And what I want to do is when I click button 1, let's save this first of all. When I click button 1, I want this to disappear, to hide. So from what we've learned already, you probably know how to do that. So we'll take our event, we'll say button 1 on click, and then what we can do is grab para2 and say dot hide. Okay, so now if we want to reload, and that's not working, button 1 on click Power 2, oh, it's power 1. Okay, and it makes it hide. And then what we could do is take button 2. So if we take button 2 here and say on click, and then we'll change hide here to show. So now, click that, it hides, click that, it shows. Alright. Now, in a lot of cases, you might want to have the same button be able to basically toggle back and forth. So for that, we can use the toggle method. So I'm going to change this right here, comment that out, and we'll say power1.toggle. So now if we reload and I click that and then click it again, it's going to go back and forth. Alright, now let's talk about some of the other events. Okay, we've just covered click up to this point. So let's comment these out. And then we're going to take, let's take button 1 and we're going to say .dbl click for double click. Okay, and then put our function and let's just toggle paragraph 1. Okay, so now if I reload, if I click once, nothing happens. If we double click, then it toggles. Okay, pretty simple. Now the next one I want to look at is hover. So I'm going to copy that and we're going to change this to hover. Okay, now if I go in, it goes away. If I leave, it comes back. Now what's interesting about hover is it's not an actual event. This is just the shorthand, but you'll see if we were to use on, let me just copy this. If we were to say button 1 dot on hover, and we'll do the toggle. Okay. Let's comment these out. Okay, so we have on hover. Now when I enter it, nothing happens because it's not a real event. It's just a shorthand syntax for two other events, okay, which is mouse enter and mouse leave. Alright, so you'll see if I change this to mouse enter, it goes away. Now when I leave, it doesn't. It has to go enter again to toggle. What hover does is it combines that along with mouse leave. So now if I go mouse leave and reload, go in, goes away, leave, comes back. Okay, so that's what this hover does. This shorthand syntax takes both of these and applies that functionality. Alright, we also have mouse move, which is pretty cool. So I'm going to just comment this out. And we'll go ahead and take that. And let's change this to mouse move. And now if I go into the element and then I start to move, you'll see that it toggles. If I move once, it comes back, move again, goes away, and it just kind of keeps doing that. And we're going to work with that more later on. So let's comment that. And then the next two that I want to show you is mouse up and mouse down. So if we say button 1 on mouse up, yeah, we'll just do that. Or actually, I'm sorry, let's do mouse down first. Okay, so if I go and I hold the mouse down, it goes away. Okay, when I let go, it doesn't come back. It's waiting for us to do mouse down again. But what we can do is combine that with mouse up. So if we go ahead and we say mouse up toggle, now if I click down, it goes away, and I release, it comes back. Okay, down, it goes away, release, comes back. So that's how mouse up and mouse down work. So those are mouse events. Now I want to show you that we can pass an optional parameter for the event. So for instance, let's take a click event which I'll just grab up here. Copy that. Okay, so we have this button one click, and what we're going to do is pass in an E parameter here. And then let's do a console.log E to see what that gives us. Okay, make sure you have your console open down here. Just click F12 and it should open. And then we'll reload, and I'll click this, and now every time I click it, you can see we get this mouse, we get this event, which has a ton of stuff. Okay, most of it is useless to us at least, but it gives you a bunch of stuff. So basically every event has its own little database with a bunch of data. Alright, so if we look at current target right here, and we open that up, it's going to give us some information such as the class name, which it doesn't have one, but if it did, we could access that. We can access the ID, which is btn1. We can get the inner HTML, the inner text. So there's a lot of things we can get here. So let's see it. Let's examine the ID. So we can say console log dot what is it? Current target dot ID. Okay, so we'll click that, or we'll save that, and let's actually do an alert instead of a console log. So now click it, and we get an alert that says btn1. Okay, so it gives us the ID. If we want to get the actual inner HTML, we can do that as well. So we'll say e.currentTarget.inner HTML, and then I'm just going to comment that out, and it gives us button 1. Okay, let's copy that, and we can also get the outer HTML, which will basically include all the tags and stuff. Let's see, undefined. Oh, I put a uppercase O. And now you can see we get the actual button tag and all that stuff. Okay, now if we wanted to add a class, let's say for our first button here, we'll say class equals btn class. Alright, and down here, change that to btn, I'm sorry, not, we want to change it to class name. Now if we click that, we get button class. Alright, so there's a lot of things you could do with being able to access all these values. So before we move on to form events, I just want to show you something pretty cool that we can do with mouse move. So let's grab this right here, this mouse move, and we'll go down here, and let's pass in that E, and then we're going to say console.log, and in here let's say chords, and this will be the Y chord, which we can get. Let's concatenate on e.client Y. Alright, and then we're going to concatenate and say X, and that'll be client, or e.client X, and that should give us the coordinates of that button when we mouse move. So you can see down in the console it's changing as we move. Okay, if you want to not use the button, we could actually use the whole document, reload, and now anywhere on the document it's going to give us our position. Okay, now if we want to bring that into the browser, we could do that as well. So if we put right here, we'll put H1, and we'll give it an ID of, let's give it an ID of chords, and then down here, instead of console log, we'll get that chords ID, and we'll say dot append, and then reload. Maybe we'll do append actually adds it So it keeps adding to the last one. So let's do HTML, which will replace it. So now as I move, you can see our exact mouse coordinates, which is pretty cool. And this HTML, we're going to get into that in the DOM manipulation section, so don't worry about that. Just wanted to show you that we could in fact do that. And you can imagine this could be good for very interactive applications that use animation and stuff like that. So let's now move on to form events. Okay, so let's see, we're going to put in, let's just put in a horizontal rule, and then we'll put in a form. And just to save some time, I'm going to paste in the inputs. Okay, so we have a label with name, input, ID is name. The name attribute we don't really need, but I just put it there anyway. And then we have the email, and then we have a gender, which is a select box. So let's save that, reload, and we get our select box. All right, I'm going to get rid of that chords for now because it's kind of distracting. Okay, so now let's go down here and we're going to comment out the rest of this stuff for now. And let's look at the focus event. Okay, now focus is when you click into an input. That's setting off focus. So let's take, we'll just say input. So all the inputs dot focus, and in here we'll pass in a function, and let's just do alert focus. Oh. Okay, so now if I reload and I click in here, we get an alert that says focus. Now, one common thing that I see a lot is when you click in a field, it'll change the color or add a border so that you know that you're in that field. So we'll comment that out, and then let's say ID. What do we have for IDs? I think we have name. So we'll say input ID name dot CSS, and in here we'll say background, and we'll set that to pink. Alright, let's save that, and now if I click in it, you'll see it's pink. Now the way we did this is not ideal because even if I click an email, that turns pink, and this is a perfect case for this, okay, using the keyword this, which means whatever event, whatever element you're currently in. So in this case, whatever input we're in. So we can just remove that and say this.css. Okay, so now if I click in there, okay, so it'll pertain to whatever one you click in. Now notice that when we click out, it doesn't go back. So we can handle that very easily with the blur event. Blur is the opposite of focus. It's when you click outside of the box. Alright, so let's copy this. And we'll say, turn this to blur. And then we'll change background to the background of the body, which I believe is that. Actually, no, we'll make it white. So now I'll click in, click out, and you can see that it's working correctly. So that's an example of focus and blur. Now we also have a key up and key down event. Okay, so basically when you push a key in or when you release it when it goes up. So I am going to, actually we'll just keep that, that's fine. But then we're going to add another. I'm going to say input, and then we're going to do dot key up, and inside here have a function, and let's see, we'll do console.log key up. Okay, now if I go in, click, and I start to type, you'll see that key up keeps logging down here. Now, what if we want to get the actual data that we're typing in. We can do that by passing in E, and then we'll change this to console log e.target.value. So now if I start to type, you'll see that it's going to give us whatever we're typing in. Alright, and the next event I want to look at is change, and we can actually pertain this to a select. So we have a select here with the ID of gender. So let's go ahead and bring this comment down to here, and then we're going to say we want input with the ID of gender, and then we're going to say dot change, and in here will be our function, and we're going to alert changed. Okay, we'll save that. And now if we go ahead and change to female, that didn't work. Let's see. Oh, I put input, should be select. There we go. So you can have something happen when a user chooses a specific value. And we should also be able to get that value if we pass in E, and then we get e.target.value. Okay, so female, and we get female. Okay, now I just want to show you the submit event. So if we want to submit a form, right up to this point we've been dealing with separate inputs. Now we're going to deal with the form itself. So we'll take that form, which I think has an ID. It doesn't, so we'll just say ID equals form, and then we'll go ID form dot submit Okay, now if we were to console.log submitted, whoops, can't type today. So let's try that and see what happens. We can fill in whatever we want and submit. I guess that has to be an email address. You know what, let's change that type to text just so we don't have to deal with that. Okay, right now it's email. Alright, so we'll just type anything in, submit, and you'll see that we're not seeing the console log down here. That's because the form is actually submitting. What we need to do to stop it is pass in E, and then we'll say e.prevent default. Okay, save that, and now submit, and you can see we get our submitted. And if we want to grab the value here, let's say we want to grab the value of name, then we'll create a variable called name. We'll set it to that input, which is input with the ID of name, and then we want to get .val. That'll give us the value. All right, and then we'll console log name. So for name, we'll just say John Doe and submit, and we get John Doe. So we could proceed to do whatever we want with these inputs. Alright, so this video is getting quite long, so what I'm going to do is stop it here. We've went over all the basic selectors, events. Now we're going to move on to DOM manipulation, which will continue in the next video.